Solitaire. It's not just a card game anymore. There are some amazing solo experiences out there for you to enjoy in the world of board games, and we're going to explore them here on Legendary Tactics. Number 10. Pandemic. This one might be surprising for some, as one does not typically think of this as a solitaire game. Pandemic is a cooperative game where players are trying to find the cure for diseases that have sprung up all around the world. The game feels especially timely at the moment, and when first released it was groundbreaking in that for many it was the first time they had ever played a cooperative board game. As a solo experience, usually playing multiple hands, the game is best played at the highest level of difficulty that one can handle. Because the interpersonal element is lost, it becomes more of a challenge as a race against time, making the most of scarce resources and actions in the most efficient way. It's a neat experience, and the variations in luck with card draws will make each playthrough unique, with a potentially great narrative that plays out over the course of the game. After pulling off a victory on the hardest level of difficulty, you will feel amazing. Number 9. Legendary Encounters is a game that is primarily played cooperatively, but that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyed solitaire. In fact, the strong storytelling elements of each scenario make for a solid solo game. The game is a battle of you against the xenomorphs made famous in Alien and Aliens back in the late 70s and 80s. You must fend off various iterations of the aliens in your efforts to complete certain goals, depending on the scenario, based on a specific alien movie of the franchise or a scenario of your own design. If you complete your goal, you win. If you don't, well... The game has real tension brought on by the relentless parade of enemies that march towards you. You have to scramble to make great card combos that will build up your strength in time to fight the big baddies at the end. And because of the way the game develops, there is a clear narrative that it follows, which makes it a perfect solo experience, where you almost feel as if you are there, not always a pleasant thought. And fair warning, the artwork here is great but graphic, which is true to the movie franchise but might not be to everyone's taste. Number 8. Labyrinth is not strictly a solitaire game, but one that is a great challenge nonetheless. The game concerns recreating the history of the War on Terror that began in 2001. One player is the US, and the other is the radical jihadists. If you can get past the controversial subject matter, there's a fascinating game here, very loosely based on Twilight Struggle. For solitaire, there is a flowchart that acts as the artificial intelligence here, and expansions have added the ability to play as either the jihadist or the US player. It can be a really good challenge to win as either side, and it tells a compelling story of what if. Below, please look for a link that shows you a website where it walks you through the flowchart much more quickly and easily. I've used this many times in my solitaire games, and it takes a lot of the administrative load off your shoulders. Number 7. All the coin games have the capacity to be played solo, but until the release of Gandhi, the 9th volume of the coin series, which introduces a card deck to handle the AI, I found the flowcharts that control the AI, or the bots as they're affectionately known, to be pretty daunting. As each game added more layers, they became more fascinating as games but harder to play solo, especially since you have to play 3 bot turns through before you get to take your own. The exception here is Andean Abyss, where the bots were simpler and more straightforward to play. I have a first edition version of Andean Abyss, and I know that they revised the bot flowchart later, but I find that the bots as originally published are quick to play and easy to manage while still offering a great challenge. I've happily played many games of Andean Abyss solo, and I recommend it as a solitaire experience to anyone who enjoys the coin series or heavier games in general. Number 6. Viticulture is one of my favorite games to cap off a night of heavy gaming. It has just the right amount of strategy and planning, but is quite relaxing to play. The solitaire game in the base set, though, is actually much more interesting than you might think. The automa simply sets a baseline that you have to surpass, and otherwise randomly plays workers in spaces to block and hamper your play. It isn't sophisticated, but it is so effective because it essentially turns the game into one where you are playing yourself, trying to find efficiencies and combinations that are going to get you past the finish line, with the automa throwing obstacles in your path. and because you can only choose one line in the turn order chart once per game, it leads to some very interesting strategic and tactical considerations. If you haven't tried this game Solitaire, you really should. It's a lot of fun. Number 5. Comancheria is the follow-up to Navajo Wars, which I honestly haven't played but could recommend on reputation alone. This game recreates the rise and fall of the Empire of the Comanches in such a memorable way. The game is designed specifically for solo play. There is a bit of rules overhead, but the game at its core is not that complicated. You control the Comanche tribes, developing your culture and expanding into new territories, raiding other tribes for resources, and dealing with the slow expansion of the European invaders. The AI is absolutely brilliant here, with counters that move around and flip like some sort of cardboard computer, dictating how the Europeans and the other tribes respond to your actions. It is so simple and yet so sophisticated, it really is worth playing just to see it in action. Number 4. B-17 Queen of the Skies. This is an oldie but goodie. Avalon Hill's B-17 Queen of the Skies is a very procedural exercise. You will roll a lot of dice and refer to a lot of charts. There aren't a lot of meaningful decisions to be made, and on the surface it seems like a super dry, cold simulation. But there is something magical that happens over the course of many games. Names on a chart begin to take on a personality. There are moments of tragedy, of heroism. You begin to root for your favorite crew members, stress out as the plane takes damage, worry about whether anyone will survive for 25 missions or if the plane will hang together for that long. This is a game that is way more than the sum of its parts. Number 3. Skies Above the Reich is such a joy to learn and to play. They say you don't even need to read the rulebook, just learn it from the player aids and use the rulebook as a reference guide. It is designed as a solo game, and although you could play co-op with a partner, it really is meant to be a personal experience. Skies Above the Reich tells a story that is little focused on, the story of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, in the last phase of the Second World War. The goal of the game is not to avoid losing, as that is inevitable. Instead, it is to avoid losing badly. You are in charge of a small contingent of planes and pilots, dealing with the attrition of war while trying to take down as many enemy bombers as possible each mission. This gets tougher as the bomber formations become more complex and the enemy fighter escorts become more plentiful. It tells an amazing story, and each battle mission plays out as a dramatic episode in a tragic TV series. Characters rise from the ranks, and you feel like you begin to know them only for them to be lost in combat and replaced by no-name greenies you feel are just going to be fodder for the war machine. Really recommend this one. Number 2. Thunderbolt Apache Leader. I had heard about this game from another YouTube creator, MarcoOmnigamer, years ago, and his review really caught my attention. He talked about what a rich game this was, the plethora of difficult decisions at every turn, and boy was he right. This game gives a plausible but fictional scenario where an enemy force is advancing, and you have a squadron of different airplanes, helicopters, and drones to stop them. You choose your pilots, outfit your vehicles, and send them into battle where they try to do enough damage before weapons and fuel run low. The game is tough. You have to make decisions all the time that just seem like the best of a bad lot. Do you send your pilot into the fray even though he is on the edge of a nervous breakdown? That helicopter seems too damaged to survive this mission, but what if that enemy infantry brigade isn't stopped in its tracks? What weapons should you equip? How many? What approach should you take? What if the enemy retreat into the hills? Then what? Should you stay on the field so you have a chance to destroy that bunker even though the fuel gauge is on empty? So many choices, but it is that sense of agency and influence that makes this a compelling solo game that is not to be missed. Number 1. Ambush is absolutely brilliant and is at the top of this list for a reason. Though its mechanics are somewhat dated by today's standards, for example, you could see the AI being handled by an app these days, as a solo experience, over a full campaign, there really is nothing like it. A player controls a squad of American soldiers and takes them through a series of missions against the Germans in Europe. Nothing on the map is visible and instead pops up when the hex is cross-checked with a paragraph book that tells the story. It has the flavor of a tabletop role-playing game, as each of your soldiers has stats that affect the gameplay. And it is a game that is much more based in Hollywood than reality, and for that reason it can tell an epic story. There will be heroism, cowardice, adventure, and grittiness. What makes this game shine is how attached you become to your soldiers. You watch them improve and develop, and sometimes pull off incredible victories despite horrible odds. The emotion that you feel when you stare at a die roll that results in one of their deaths is akin to real grief. That soldier is gone. When you replace him with a soldier with similar statistics, it's just not the same. This is truly a once-in-a-lifetime solitaire experience. If you can get a hold of a copy of Ambush, I would recommend that you get it and play it. Thank you for watching my breakdown of the top 10 solitaire games that I have ever come across. If you have any others that you would suggest, put them in the comments. And while you're there, please like, please subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time here on Legendary Tactics.